but there has been a form of a kind of conspiracy of silence because of the seriousness of this particular situation. As you know, faced with allegations only, allegedly of a non-criminal nature, the Chief Justice submitted his resignation, taking a leave of absence until the end of the year. He is still the Chief Justice of the Court of Appeal of British Columbia under these highly serious allegations. Well, Attorney General Gardy Gardam has taken a very odd, hands-off attitude all the way. Otto Lang, the Minister of Justice, the man who started the ball rolling, also has taken a hands-off attitude. In Winnipeg last week, for instance, he took that. Yesterday, the clerk of the Judicial Council told us that contrary to what we believed, there was to be no inquiry by the Judicial Council that he knew about. Otto Lang, however, seemed to change his mind and his position only yesterday, when our reporter in Ottawa, Christine Hearn, went to the Minister of Justice, and don't forget, this started all the way back sometime in October, and she put this question to Otto Lang, straight up on the camera, about the judicial inquiry.
When did you refer it to the Judicial Council, and how?
I did by letter quite some time ago now. I don't recall the exact date, but it is a fair time ago.
Would that letter have been to Mr. Justice Borlaskin, Chief Justice Borlaskin, or to the clerk of the council itself?
It would have been to the chairman of the council, which is the Chief Justice of Canada.
That explains something. Otto Lang's letter was to the chairman of the Judicial Council of Canada, Chief Justice Bora Laskin of the Supreme Court of Canada. We were baffled, of course, because when Christine spoke to Mr. Chamberlain, the clerk to the Judicial Council of Canada yesterday, he told us very frankly that he knew of no letter, no inquiry, or anything at all about the Farris affair. We have now established this much, that the Chief Justice of Canada, holding an inquiry under the terms of this Judicial Council, will refer a report back to the Minister of Justice. What will be in that report, what will happen to that report, whether it will be public or private, we do not know. We merely know that a storm of confusion and attacks on the credibility of the system of justice have been arising in this province and perhaps also across the country. And in my view, and I don't know the answer to it, as I've said earlier in the week, in my view, it is imperative that the politicians, both the Provincial Attorney General Gardy Gardam, who is responsible for inquiries and the administration of justice in British Columbia, and Otto Lang, the Federal Minister of Justice, part of whose job it is to appoint judges, that they find a forum in which the public can be reassured of the status and the credibility of the system of the administration of justice, so that no innocent man can be wrongly smeared, or that no set of circumstances about which the public must know can be hidden from our gaze. This morning, I can't find any lawyers to talk to me on this particular topic. Of those I have checked, I must say, there will of course be some, because lawyers and judges are necessarily so interwoven. It becomes a super-sensitive affair. And the lawyers to whom I have spoken, by and large, wish that we in the media, and those of us who are commentators, would drop the whole thing and let it die. This morning I've asked a politician of some considerable principle, and I don't know what his answers to the questions will be, Gordon Gibson, of the Liberal Party in British Columbia, to give me his views on what must be done, if anything, to satisfy public's anxiety about the administration of justice in British Columbia. You'll decide about your federal future at that time, subject to certain things.
Yeah, that's right. Or, of course, if there's a federal call first, I'll make my decision at that point, whichever it is.
I think your position is quite defensible and very sensible, to be quite honest.
Well, shit, I've been in this business long enough. I'm not going to run unless I really believe in what I'm...
Mr. Gibson, you and I have tackled a number of very serious subjects over a long number of years in your career, both in Ottawa and in Victoria. I want to ask you, without really prodding you or prompting you, what do you think could or should, if anything, be done on the Farris affair?
Well, I think that there's very few situations we've looked at, Jack, that we should look at with a greater sense of humility, because this one is in recent times not precedented in our province. You have to have a great deal of concern for it, in part because of the individual tragedy, and it is an individual tragedy, and in part because of the integrity of the system. And there's two main things I would look at. The first is that with all the fuss going around, and there's two particular cases on at the moment, and suggestions others may be coming up, we must keep in mind that any improprieties in the judicial system are the exception. They are not the rule. The integrity of that system, the realization of that, must be maintained in people's minds. I can't overemphasize that. There are dozens of judges in this province. Doctors, lawyers, politicians, always sometimes there are problems, but we have to keep a faith as long as there's a cleansing process in that system. There's a U.S. columnist you probably know who makes a living in his own town by suggesting that all the aldermen are crooked. That's his regular column. That's not true in Canada. It's not true in Vancouver, not true in BC. And our whole society, and especially our criminal justice system, is based on a trust and a respect for law, a belief that, generally speaking, policemen are honest and fair, that judges are honest and fair, and that laws are honest and fair. And we mustn't undermine that, but change it where necessary. Because, as you know so well, there's a thin line in any society between anarchy on one side, when the laws don't get enforced because people say, oh, they'll overlook it, or the juvenile laws aren't strong enough, why even bother to call a policeman? Anarchy on one side and a police state on the other side, where you saw the first draft of the Heroin Act where bureaucrats were going to be able to lock people up for 3 years without any kind of a trial. So there's always that thin line to balance. You've got to keep the system clean. You've got to make it possible also for decent people to operate in that system with some discretion and without harassment, or else you won't get good people in that system. And that's one of the things that bothers me about the whole overtones of this affair. Politics is an example of one profession where there's enough mud thrown at people, and God knows we throw too much mud at each other, that a lot of good people just say, I'm not going to go into that business. There's too much hassle. I never want to see that happen to our law enforcement system. So that's the overall thing, the integrity of the system. It's there and we got to maintain it. Now the second thing is the cleansing process. I don't want to comment very much on the two existing cases, but more on the process. You've got to have something. You've always got, of course, if there's any illegal act that's committed, you've got a remedy there. It's up to the police to investigate, the Attorney General to prosecute. That's fine. But there are times when in any position of public trust, there may be things that are not illegal but nevertheless cause incapacity. The incapacity may be caused for reasons of health or alcoholism or anything. Where that might lead to a maladministration of justice, there has to be some accountability. Look at this combination of power and accountability. Politicians, opposition politicians in particular, have no power and lots of accountability every election time. Government politicians have quite a lot of power, but they too have quite a lot of accountability. Maybe they should have more. I've advocated there should be a recall process if they get too far out of line, but leave that be. There's accountability there. Judges have a lot of power and very little accountability, and there's a reason for that, because judges have to be the independent arbitrator between the state and the citizen, and the citizen must always have an independent judiciary to protect them from the state, and that's the reason that judges are so independent, so little accountable, and so hard to remove. You know what it takes to remove a judge.
To remove a Supreme Court judge is an address of both the House of Commons and the Senate, am I correct?
That's right, and it's almost unheard of. And that amounts, in effect, that's the way a judge is tried. If it ever comes time to try a judge, he's tried by Parliament. To
remove a provincial court judge, of course, is a matter for the Lieutenant Governor and Council after the considerations of the BC Judicial Council.
Yeah.
But we must face not the specific situation. I'm not going to question you on this and that or timing and whatnot. I'm putting it to you that here we have a situation where the highest judge in the land of British Columbia has said, I have been faced with certain allegations, you know, which, true or not, let me get the exact quote on that so we just get it dead right. I don't like to be sloppy in quotes in this case. It says, I consider the mere fact I have been advised of certain allegations against me, brackets, not of a criminal nature, have been referred to the Canadian Judicial Council for investigation. I consider the mere fact that these allegations have been made, regardless of their substance, have so impaired my usefulness as Chief Justice that it is in the public interest that I resign. The top judge in the land takes the allegations, substantiated or not, as sufficient to cause his immediate leave-taking, with somebody's approval, and resignation at the end of the year. Do you think that we must therefore accept that situation as a fact, and as the politicians would like to do, and merely say, that is the end of it. The man has resigned in the face of certain allegations. We have sufficient faith that nothing beyond this has taken place, or nothing has been done to impugn the administration of justice, and say, thank you very much, Mr. Lang, thank you very much, Mr. Gardam, and consider the matter closed. Now, that is the question with which we are faced. When the man in the pub says, of any allegations against judges, especially those where there have been public hearings, name of goodness, what is going on there? These are the people who can deprive me of my liberty. Can I trust them? Can I have credibility in them? Even although I'm the first to say that the standard of Supreme Court judges, High Court judges, County Court judges in British Columbia is now higher than it has ever been within your knowledge and my knowledge, generally speaking. Right. Now, do I as a commentator, presumably with some minor influence on a number of people, say, okay, Otto Lang says it's over and done with, Gardam says it's none of his business, thank you very much, appoint a new Chief Justice of the Court of Appeal and carry on. Do we take that attitude? Do you take that attitude?
I think the ministers of justice have to go a bit further than that. Let's look at the existing case that you're concerned about. Possibility one, some criminal difficulty. In that case, you have no concern, I take it. You're satisfied that there'll be an investigation if there's any criminal possibility. That'll go the usual route. The second possibility I think is perhaps more concerning you is, was there something wrong in the performance of judicial duties?
Or could there have appeared to be something wrong? The old quote, justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. And I'm not for a moment suggesting there was anything wrong. I'm merely saying that faith in the system in circumstances like this can shatter, lack of faith can shatter the system.
So the normal and proper course of events, as I see it, is a complaint has been made. Reference to the Judicial Council. The Judicial Council in this stream of events is what you might call the investigative arm, just as the police would be in the other. And incidentally, and I don't know if we have an agreement or disagreement on this, I think that investigative process, as a police investigation, should not be public.
Must be public. Must be private.
It must be private. And that's a long-time principle of criminal justice. Otherwise, people against whom there is no case stand convicted in
Correct.
the public mind. So that part, the investigation of the Judicial Council, must be private unless the time comes that there is to be a laying of a case. In this case, a case before Parliament, which would act as the judge and jury. So the Judicial Council, if there are possibilities that there was a maladministration of justice or an appearance of that because of anything surrounding this business, the Judicial Council must continue and complete an investigation into that. They must then report on their findings, and then that's an end of it, or it goes to what you might call trial before Parliament, one or the other.
You're making a very logical point. First of all, my point has been slightly different in that we, as reporters here and in Ottawa, have found it very difficult to get finite information on the process and what has happened with the Judicial Council. Now we are assured, I'll grant you, that the Judicial Council has been referred the matter and will report back to the Minister of Justice. You're therefore saying that, subject to the contents of that report, it is Otto Lang's responsibility to decide whether or not it goes public or is accepted as a private recommendation. Is that right?
Not being a lawyer, I don't know whether that's the Chief Justice of Canada's responsibility, the Minister of Justice, but it's one of those two's responsibilities.
It finally ends in the hands of the politicians.
Yes, because they must bring it before Parliament. That's correct. But the Ministers of Justice, both federal and provincial, must, in the current circumstances, I think, do something more than that, because there have been suggestions that the process itself has not been working too well. The cleansing process hasn't been working too well. It's been delayed improperly and that kind of thing. I think the Ministers of Justice at both levels have to examine not the case so much as the process in each of their jurisdictions, and report back to their legislatures in order that the public can be satisfied that the way the system works is proper.
So you're saying that any public inquiry could only follow as a result of a decision either of the Attorney General of British Columbia involved with, if there were any charges laid involving any persons, or if Otto Lang decides to take action as the Federal Minister of Justice.
But they should look into the process. They should say, is the process working
Should there
properly?
be a public inquiry regardless, or would that be a witch hunt, unfair and most unjust?
I would be premature to conclude that at this point. There should unquestionably be an inquiry as to whether or not the Judicial Council process is working in both of those jurisdictions. But Jack, I'm very concerned. I know you're very concerned. People are being tried and convicted in the court of public opinion without any stated case against them. The allegations in this case that have been made public are minor. And
that's a question of interpretation, Mr. Gibson. A judge is somebody above and beyond the ordinary citizen. A judge at the lower court level or the higher court level has special responsibilities that his conduct in public and in effect in private must at all times be above reproach.
Yes.
I quoted yesterday from the Provincial Judicial Council Act, which I'm sure was probably lifted from some federal thing. He must voluntarily impose upon himself certain restrictions on his behavior, his associations, his public appearances, and conduct himself at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. I have a feeling, Gordon, that you are prepared to trust the system, and if the system decides a resignation is sufficient, you will accept that.
I want the two ministers of justice to re-examine that system and report to Parliament and to the legislature. And I think the legislatures should examine them very carefully as to whether or not that process is adequate. But the process must be one that is fair and that does not itself destroy the system. If we ever reach the stage in this country where the mere finding of a name in someone's book without any other proof being adduced, without any other trial being had, can be sufficient to destroy not just an individual but a system, then it's not working right.
Webster and Gordon Gibson. Not for some little time.
No, not for some time.
Sounds. Going to be difficult to change the conversation after that session, isn't it, Gordon?
Well, that's one of the most difficult things that's happened in this province in a long time.
As I was telling you when you were getting made up this morning, you're not normally this handsome. You're well made up this morning. It's the first time in all my years around this business that I have even considered being overawed by the gravity of a topic. And, you know, one tends to think, oh, let it go away. All judges are fine people. Hide it underneath the table. But you can't in all conscience.
No, you can't. The public simply must be satisfied that the system is above reproach, and whatever is necessary to do that must be done.
Well, as a matter of fact, I was going to change the subject, but just one more little nag. In the Benrod affair, there's poor Benrod, paraded in front of a public inquiry at one level of judges because of certain admissions of fact which were made after a preliminary investigation. And these admissions, and believe you me, Gordon, they wanted to keep that inquiry secret too, which I think is quite intolerable. Once it comes to the stage of an inquiry, surely, the public must be at the inquiry.
You have to make the distinction between the investigation and the trial.
Oh yes, well there was an investigation in the Benrod thing, a report to Judicial Council, admissions of fact, certain admissions, I'm not going to nag them just now, and then a public inquiry. In the other one, all we have is a very important man resigning on the basis of allegations. And that, of course, is in some ways quite horrifying.
Can't be left there.
Can't be left there.
Nor would it be fair to the public or to Mr. Farris if it were.
That's the other point. I mean, it may well be that Mr. Farris very properly says, my public usefulness has been impugned, or whatever those words were, but they were very good words. My usefulness has been so impaired that I must resign. We cannot tolerate a situation whereby any public official, Chief Justice or not, must resign because his usefulness is impaired because of allegations. So therefore, the matter must be tested.
But I would go on to say that the Judicial Council should complete its investigation, and if they find that there are no improprieties that are required to be drawn to the attention of the minister, then it seems to me we should have enough trust in our judicial system to say, good, it's been aired. The investigation, in this case by the judges rather than by the police, and the criminal side is by the police, the investigation has been done.
That is where I hesitate to say, but I must part company with you. And one feels great pity for the individuals so involved. But I don't know that the public might well accept it. If the public are not reminded about it, they'll just let it go away. But down the years, reference will be made to the circumstances in which they'll say, I'm up in front of such and such a court. Hey, what did they do about that fellow who quit the bench? I'm talking about the man in the pub, who is the man of the house on whom the entire system in the final analysis depends.
But if in a criminal case, if the police do an investigation and decide there's insufficient evidence to lay a charge, that's an end of it. And you agreed earlier on that that's right and fair. Because if there's no trial, a person has no chance to defend themselves.
Except for the one thing, that's what I'm saying, back to my original point. And I'm not looking for an argument, I'm trying to give you my sincere opinions, as you're giving me. What's the word? The size of this, not the size, the import is so immense, the immensity of it is that when a top judge in the land must walk away because of allegations, one says, or he must be defended to the hilt in a public forum to clear it for once and for all, for good or for evil.
Well, I guess we have a slightly different approach, but maybe not two. I say the Minister of Justice federally and the Attorney General in their own respective jurisdictions must make an investigation of the overall thing and report.
I'll make one last point. Every single person who has spoken officially on this case, from the point of view of protecting the public interest as they see it, Otto Lang, lawyer; Stu Leggett, lawyer; Gardy Gardam, lawyer; Alec MacDonald, lawyer. The lawyers to whom I have spoken saying, I want, as I'm having with you this morning, a serious discussion on the Farris case. And they say, well, Jack, you know, it's very difficult for me. I'm a lawyer. How can I tell you on the air what I really think are my views? Or another lawyer told me, well, look, you're all wrong, Webster. You don't trust the system. The system is perfectly trustworthy. If they say there's nothing more to it, you must accept that. And other lawyers, because of this basic conflict of interest between judges, or it's not a conflict of interest, it's a similarity of interest between lawyers and judges, which blocks out the ordinary mortal from the inside story and the confidential discussions in the business. And that's where we must rely on the politicians to tell us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We'll leave it at that.
Good.
We'll turn to other things. I'm going to take a break a little earlier just now. That was a kind of heavy discussion. I'm going to come back and talk to Gordon briefly, a little bit anyway, about the budget, about your own personal future, if any, in politics, and other things, with Gordon Gibson. Gordon Gibson.
Yes.
What are you going to do? What is your situation? Leader of the Liberal Party, if you'll forgive the expression, in British Columbia.
I'm proud of the expression.
Oh, well, okay, be proud of the expression, but you're not going to be the leader much longer, are you?
No, I've announced I'm not running again in the next provincial election whenever that happens. And I'll tell you why. It's because after 15 years in this business of politics, I've come to the conclusion that there are some problems with our system of government that need sorting out, and I think that the easiest pressure point to do those things now is in Ottawa, because I don't think they're ready to make these reforms in Victoria, and they might be in Ottawa, because the whole thing's been loosened up by the constitutional talks. The things that I'm going to devote myself to now, in addition to general questions of public policy, but the The real need, it seems to me, is government reforms that make people trust their governments more. You know, the average person, they don't feel they have any control over Ottawa. They feel they have very little control over Victoria and some control over municipal councils. You can at least go down there and at question period ask some questions. You can't do that in Victoria or Ottawa, and you got no hold over these guys except once every 4 years, and then it's this person or that person, and no specific issue. So there's three things I want to see. I want to see a proper freedom of information law in this country, first of all, and then in this province. I want to see control by Parliament over the Cabinet, because we all know how it works now, both in Ottawa and in Victoria. You know, the Cabinet runs Parliament, not vice versa.
And the Prime Minister becomes, in effect, a dictator.
Well, I've said this about every majority government, premiers, prime ministers, everyone. If it's a majority government, it's a 4-year elected dictatorship. The only people we can get at is our individual MLA or MP, and yet that person does not have the kind of control over government that they should have. So I want more power shifted from the Cabinet to Parliament. That's the second thing. The third thing is I want to put some ability to get at issues, specific issues, directly into the hands of the citizenry. Some means of direct democracy, so that if there's a sufficient number of people express concern through signature on a petition, and let's make it difficult, because you can't run a country on ordinary things this way. Let's say you have to get 10%, which is 1.5 million signatures in Canada. But if you can get that many signatures, we should have machinery that would allow us to suspend any law passed by Parliament until it was voted on by the public, and we should have machinery to allow us to start a law if Parliament refuses to move. If we'd had that kind of thing, we would have had in British Columbia, we would have had a question period in the legislature long before 1972.
Oh, yeah.
We would have had a Freedom of Information Act long ago. We would have rate control over BC Hydro. All these kinds of things which governments have never found it convenient to do for their own purposes.
We would have had recall even in the conduct of cabinet ministers.
Yes, on occasion, this device of recall, I should add that. In other words, if your representative gets too far out of line, and I'd put a higher figure than 10% on that. I'd say you should have 30% signature on that, because you got to give a person some freedom of
Mind you,
of
there
movement.
is a danger in the Proposition X thing. I mean, if you looked at the Jarvis case in California very closely, I'm convinced, I've read stuff to this effect anyway, that the people who benefited from Proposition, whatever it was in California, wasn't the little man at all, it was the big boys, the Standard Oil of New Jersey. And with a big propaganda machine, especially in a country like Canada, where you have no real viable free press, you've only got an establishment press, right? You could...
not counting you.
Well, no, not.
I appreciate
you know
that
the point
objection.
I made.
I know the point you make.
You can set up a straw man like Jarvis, whoever, and whip something through which is really nonsensical.
But two comments on that. First of all, there's nothing like a 10% requirement in California. It's much lower. So in other words, you'd put a higher hurdle on, I think, to make it work right. And secondly, I have a great faith in the common sense of people. I don't think they're going to get snowed. And the Proposition 13 thing. Maybe in its technicalities there were difficulties with it. There definitely were, but it has done good all over this continent. It has put the fear of God into a lot of governments, and that's not a bad thing to happen occasionally.
Okay, next question. Are you still a Liberal, capital L?
Yes.
And I mean, you're still dedicated to Pierre?
Yes.
And you'd give the back of your hand to anything to remove him from the leadership?
He is the right man to be leading Canada at this time.
That's 10 years now.
Jack, we're coming to a point where there's a culmination of something that's been going on, and that is a rewriting of our Constitution and the basic ground rules under which we live.
Oh, I'll interrupt you. I have a major suggestion to make to you as far as reforming Parliament is concerned. We now get prime ministers by accident. Trudeau was a political accident in some ways. You would concede that. Clark was undoubtedly, you will confirm, a political accident. Should it not be that the Prime Minister of the country is the member of the House of Commons after the election who is supported by the majority of members in Commons, and instead of being chosen by a bunch of flag-waving, rosette-trimmed, mini-skirted, saxophone-honking political hacks at anybody's political party? In other words, would we not get, I'm not talking about Trudeau or Clark, in the long run, the best man in the House of Commons, if he were chosen in the traditional fashion, by his peers instead of by, people from all across the country?
In other words,
being lobbied into number groups.
so you're saying that prime ministers should be chosen only by members of parliament and not by general
From
members of a
those
political
elected
party?
to the House of Commons. I think you'd
Well-
find that you'd get much more faith in the prime ministership and get more action in the House of Commons, and you would have control over the prime minister that way too.
That's the way the Conservatives always used to do it in England, as you know.
It could still be done now if the majority of the members in the House of Commons, for some reason, lost confidence in Prime Minister X today.
Tell you why that would give me concern. It would take away, really, perhaps the most important reason for belonging to a political party. And I think it's important.
Choosing the leader.
Yes, and choosing candidates and so
It's
on.
only a suggestion. It's only a suggestion. I will now accept from you 60 seconds on the brilliant recovery budget released last night by Jean Chrétien.
Well, it was economically right because it concentrates on inflation, and he didn't have much room for maneuver. And it was politically gutsy because it would have been much more popular to reduce income tax, and it would have been much more visible to the ordinary person than this sales tax cut. It's a good thing to cut the sales tax, though, because it's one of these hidden taxes. This is the federal sales tax. People never see it. It brings in billions of dollars a year, and people never realize they're being taxed, and taxes like that aren't good.
Anyway, it cut the sales tax to 9%. They indexed the personal exemptions by 9%.
Which will put a lot of money in people's pockets. The investment incentives for research and development and for Western resource industries
Oh
are
yeah,
something very good
100%
for us.
deduction of exploration costs for mining.
Yeah, and
Will that help BC?
Development costs, yeah, that'll definitely help BC.
The NDP will scream it's another corporate rip-off.
Corporate ripoff is one of these is one of these phrases which have done more to debase the political dialogue in this country than anything I can imagine.
So your political
Simplify.
career in British Columbia is restricted to the calling of the next federal election or the next provincial election, whichever comes first. Is that correct?
Now, Jack, whether I run federally or not, I don't know. I've set down some things that if the party will go some distance towards these reforms, I'll run. If they won't, I'll go after them in other ways.
Arrogant, isn't it?
It's an unusual thing for an individual candidate to do, but it's what I believe. So
If you were elected, of course, you'd be an automatic cabinet choice from the West Coast, wouldn't you?
I don't know about that, but I'd be an automatic fighter for these reforms.
How'd you like to chance some telephone calls?
Sure.
Will you? Gordon Gibson, Webster, telephones, now. Okay, right, quick. No, I made a decision. If you've got him for Sunday night, I'm not going out Sunday night. Admired him for sheer arrogant guts. Last night on the
Good God.
You notice it's the Webster Dutka team, Linda and me. Did you say hello?
Hello, Linda.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, hello. It's been very nice to hear Gordon Gibson speaking so clearly, so well organized. This is what I really, it's very
He's
refreshing.
quite a nice chap.
Yes, he is. I hope he gets into Ottawa. I think we need him very much. But I feel that he didn't go far enough with this judge thing. It's still worrying me very much. Because I don't really believe that the judge acted according to our judicial system.
No, let me put you right there. And I want to give that undying quote from Attorney General Gadi Gardner. He said that the Chief Justice resigned in the highest and best traditions of the bench. I'm sure he didn't. It was unconscious humor, as it often is, from the Attorney General.
That's what seems to bother so many people that
I mean,
I
it cannot be in the highest and best traditions or the finest traditions of the bench, can it, Gordon, when one walks away from such an important job? Now, anything else, ma'am?
Well, I just wanted to point out the difference that being scared by allegations, it sounds like the Napoleonic Code country. And this is what our judicial system...
She's saying very clearly it sounds like guilty before being innocent, Napoleonic Code country.
Yes.
That is a problem.
You know, you'd carry that to the extreme and you find yourself thinking, well, will the Queen have to abdicate if there are allegations against her?
That's exactly right. That's the danger I was pointing out, and that's why the investigation phase of this kind of thing has to be carried on privately, and only if there is a case
But must that
then become public.
Let me put it to Gordon again. If after the investigation, Lang says, I am satisfied with the investigation, do we all bow down and say, thank you very much, Mr. Lang. You have a distinguished political career behind you. You've got half a dozen jobs you're trying to do. You haven't been forthright or forthcoming on this matter up to now. And just say, or should we say, no, we demand a public inquiry.
We demand and should have from Mr. Lang an accounting of the system and the fact that it is working. But on the particular case, it's not Mr. Lang. It's the Judicial Council, which is headed up by the Chief Justice of this country, and which will make a report to Mr. Lang. And if that report says that everything is all right, then I think we have to either accept the word of our judges, or, my God, we better reform the whole system.
You're suggesting that for if Bora Laskin's Judicial Council says, confidential, secret, attention of minister only. We have conducted an investigation, such and such and such and such. We are convinced, therefore, that the resignation fits the bill. But we should then say, that's fine.
Supposing the resignation does not fit the bill.
No.
There is the possibility that he's innocent.
Yes.
He's giving in because of allegations. That's his implication. And if he's innocent, then he owes it to the system to act according to his innocence or to admit his guilt.
That woman has put it well.
Pardon?
You have put it very well, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
And hopefully the Judicial Council will determine exactly that.
But you see, you are such, you yourself are such, no, I don't want to say that. You would be prepared to accept the decision of the Chief of the Canadian Judicial Council without that matter being made public, without that report being made public.
I would want to see, put it this way, an extensive decision. I would not necessarily need to know all of the investigative material that was uncovered unless there was a basis for a charge.
I put it
If somebody comes along to you and says that Webster or Gibson did something, would you please go investigate it? The police go and investigate it. They come back, they say there is no basis for a charge. That file remains in police headquarters, nobody sees it, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, but if it's Webster or Gibson, we are comparative non-entities who are not key to the system. If I held a high public office and an allegation was made against me in public, the last thing that I would do is say, because of these allegations, I'm walking away. I'd fight it to the death, I think. I mean, I'm not trying to be... And your reaction would be, you would fight it to the death.
And I would assume that Mr. Farris has that option, in the sense of could in some way ask that there be publicity about this case. Now, I'm not enough of a lawyer to know what his options are. But
Oh, the options as a free individual are to go public anytime you want to. There's nothing to stop you. God knows you go public every day on other issues, but not on your private life, needless to say. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Mr. Gibson, I'd like to make a statement and combine it with a question. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. And that's on the Constitution and also the business of the United Canada. On the Constitution, there are a couple of things that really bother me, and that is that as the Parliament is a club for lawyers, they can make the thing sound so complicated, and I'm not so sure that the ordinary person is going to have much of a say what goes into that Constitution. Therefore, I'd like to see whatever is put forward then comes before the public in the form of a plebiscite.
Now, in other words, you want the Constitution as a plebiscite, said Webster, talking to green button number 2.
I think that there's got to be some confidence. I'm afraid that in that Constitution, you are going to be faced with 1/3 of the, or 1/4 of the parliamentary is going to be French, and we know that Mr. Trudeau is striving to put in certain French rights, and I'm not against the French rights. I think they should have all the rights in the world. But not that it's going to make, it's impossible to make this country a bilingual country. It's never worked anywhere in the world.
in early September, in early September, I testified before the Parliamentary Committee on the Constitution, and I made the point that you were making there, that a constitution is something that is so basic it must belong to the people, it must be approved by the people. And I say that once all of the politicians have had our say, that it should then be submitted to the electorate, and it must receive a majority in each of the regions of the country, not just overall, but a majority in British Columbia, a majority on the prairies, and so on.
Go ahead, please.
And then no politician can say, well, we disagree with that document, because it's the people's document.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack and Gordon. Gordon, we parted company about 10 years ago when Trudeau came on the scene, and I still see that you haven't learned your lesson about Mr. Trudeau. However, let's go on to Mr. Farris. Speaking as an ordinary citizen, both of you chaps know that the law is based on precedent. And one thing that concerns me greatly in this Farris incident is that if Mr. Farris gets away with being able to say, my usefulness has been impugned because someone has made a serious allegation against it, what is to stop other incidents of this kind occurring, whether or not the man is guilty or not? This is a very serious consequence of this particular action by Mr. Farris, and it should not be allowed to happen, because there is a growing feeling in the minds of the public that there is a law for the poor, a law for the rich, and a law for the lawyers, the judges, and the politicians. And this is not good in a democratic system. And this is what is a very serious consequence of something like this being allowed to happen. It should come out in the open, because if the Chief Justice is innocent, there is no way that it should be allowed for a man of his stature to be knocked off the bench for an allegation that is not justified. And if it is justified, then there is no way that he should be allowed to sit on the bench, and it should be made public.
A judge said, you know, in a recent case involving a former British Columbia cabinet minister, that the law is tougher where politicians are concerned, and I assume where judges are concerned.
No,
too.
you're not responding to the point.
No, but I'm making that point in passing, because I'm saying there not and there must not be a different law for different kinds of people.
Well, no, there must be. No, I've got to stop you there, Gordon. I'll tell you why there's got to be. This man made the point, which I have made, but not quite so well as he made it, that when a Chief Justice resigns on the basis of an allegation, it becomes patently clear that any person, as a judge, can be susceptible to blackmail-type pressures. If you don't do this, or don't do that, or don't get off the bench, I'll make an allegation.
No, you're talking about different standards for different types of people, and I agree with that. But the laws, the law
is the same, but the standards are different, and judges have special responsibilities.
Now, this gentleman on the phone raises two questions. One is the possibility that in the future some figure will be forced off the bench when in fact they are innocent. And that person at that time has every right to take whatever action they want to fight that.
Remember, or even now.
That's the individual's choice. He raises the other possibility that there may be some wrongdoing that gets swept under the carpet. That is what the Judicial Council inquiry is for, and it simply must proceed. That's all.
But what he's telling you is, and what I think too, is that it cannot be done. It cannot finish in a secret file. It must be tabled or discussed on the floor of the House of Commons, or inquired or publicized or published. It cannot be. We cannot take the word of politicians that all is well. It's as simple as that, Mr. Gibson. We cannot take the word of politicians.
Gordon.
Just a minute. Hold your breath, old chap. Take a break, please. Thank you. Remind me not to tell you who it was. It was not one of my favorite people. Hold on, please. Back on the air again, Gordon. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I have a comment to make regarding the choice of a leader of a party for Prime Minister.
Go on.
Don't you believe that it's pretty well that way already? Because if the party that is elected puts forth a man who is to be their Prime Minister and the people vote on him, isn't it just about the same thing that happens when the party chooses a leader before the election as what would happen if they chose their man after the election?
Well, I suppose in theory the parliamentary caucus might choose a different person than the party as a whole chose. I think the party as a whole route is more representative of certainly the party and perhaps the country. And don't forget, and Jack, you know this very well, the caucus can always get rid of a prime minister. They can always vote him out.
Yeah, that's really the important part of that one, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello, is that Jack Webster?
Hold on, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
One question, please. Hello?
Yes, that's better.
Hello?
Yes, speak up, ma'am. Do go ahead.
One question, please.
Yes.
I would like to know.
I give up on you, ma'am.
Hello?
What you're suffering from is called 6-second paranoia. When you don't have your television set down and two voices are being fed into your little eardrums, you go slightly round the bend. And go turn down your little television set and I'll come back to you. Where shall I go, Linda? Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please. This is not harmonic garden.
Maybe we should sing a song?
Yeah, maybe you could do a little dance. Take one. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Gibson.
Yeah.
As an individual person, if you are going to run for the federal government, how can you, Mr. Gibson, as an individual, change everything without the majority of the caucus in the Liberal Party or whatever party is in power behind you?
Well, first of all, I certainly have no pretensions as to being able to change everything. All I'm saying is that if I am to run, I would like my party to adopt as a part of its platform certain of these governmental reforms that I think are important to bring Parliament closer to the people, and that's all. It's that's the platform I want to run on. And
if they don't accept it, you won't run. If it's not available, you won't run.
That's right.
Yes, but Gordon, you as an individual, can you get the Liberal Party to actually adopt your platform that you stand for as an individual?
I don't know. That remains to be seen. That's the gamble I'm taking.
He has some high hopes on it, though, obviously. You've been encouraged a little bit here and there, or you wouldn't be taking this public position at all.
I have some hopes.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I was impressed with your opinions on your parliamentary reform. I was wondering how you felt about having our elections provincially and federally on a definite basis every 4 years, give or take a month or something, instead of this, what we go through with public poll opinions and putting it off and putting it off.
Our election should be every 4 years, unquestionably, unless there's a vote of confidence. And that should apply federally and provincially, and we should have no more of this playing around with the election timetable. Flat.
Go ahead, please.
Yes. Mr. Gibson, I'd like to ask a question. Why is it that when you elect a member, either MLA or MP, and you may try to contact him at some time, he's very seldom available. When you want to see this man, you run into government problems and so forth, you try to get information from your MLA or your MP. He always seems to be away in some other part of the country at the time.
Mr. Gibson, when did you stop beating your wife? You can't answer that question. Some MPs do a good job, some MPs don't do a good job.
The MPs, I don't know that well. The MLAs, I know that most of them have offices, and I maintain an office in my riding, and it's in the phone book. And
if your own MLA won't help you, go to another MLA. That's about all you can do, sir, because some of them are excellent and some of them are awful.
Yes, well, as I say, I've been 32 years a Liberal, and
you're still a Liberal after 32 years?
32 years, but I have my doubts this year. That's the...
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to get this information as to why these things happen.
Give my office a call, would you? 980-0557.
980-0557.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Oh,
yes.
I think it should be pointed out that Mr. Farris will continue to get the handsome rewards of high office after December the 31st. He will receive a pension of about 80% of his salary, and then his wife will continue to get that pension if he should die. So he's not losing a thing, is he?
I have asked our reporter in Ottawa to check that specifically. It would depend, of course, on the measure on the type of severance from office. On the resignation, I have no doubt that Mr. Farris would qualify in some way for the somewhat handsome judicial pension, which is given to them so that they have security. But in this particular area, where you're dealing with the reputations of people and their futures and their family life, you've got to be very careful and attempt to be fully responsible. It's not easy. We'll take a couple of calls anyway. Where am I? Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Gibson.
Good morning.
Federal Liberal Party. Do you believe in the civil rights of your fellow man?
Of course.
Of course.
Do you believe in one person for the civil rights?
Well, now what are you asking about, ma'am? You're not making any sense.
I don't make sense?
No, you don't. Of course we believe in civil rights, motherhood, decency. We're against sin, against alcoholism.
Sin. Because I don't...
Against smoking.
Mr. Farris should apologize for being guilty.
Well, ma'am, that's an indiscreet remark in any case, and she obviously doesn't have any understanding of the situation. The matter must be discussed. Next one. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Webster.
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to ask Gordon Gibson why, after 10 years, he still has so much confidence in Mr. Trudeau.
Well, my particular concern in this country right now is the reform of our Constitution. I think it's the most important thing that's going on. I know the economy is important, but the two things are so intertwined, and this uncertainty in Canada that where our top politicians have been spending all their energy arguing mostly about federal-provincial bickerings over the last 10 years, we have to get this straightened out and behind it. And I think that Mr. Trudeau is a man to do that. It's just that simple.
Mr. Gibson, do you have the same confidence in the bright, charismatic 50-odd-year-old man who came in 10 years ago, when you were on his staff, one of his brains trust, that you have in him today? I mean, do you think he's as bright today as he was 10 years ago and as full of promise?
No question he's as bright today as he was 10 years ago.
Is he still as full of promise, or is merely full of promises?
You know, he's the man that's needed right now for Canada for this constitutional thing, and that is very, very important. I can't stress that overly. And let me say, I'm not on an election campaign right now, but let me say that this country is not in bad shape either.
Is that so?
That's so.
Certainly not because of the Liberals, because in the West, you have gone from one government and 58 MLAs to 2 MLAs only in just 10 years. You know that's the truth.
Yes, I know that's the truth. It's got to be turned around.
Thank you for coming this morning, and thank you for your careful deliberations on the Farris tragedy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Next time.
You comment. My English is as bad as yours, I think.
As bad as my English?
Oh, yes.
Or as bad...
Oh, I don't know. That one.
E.T.
That pronounced Pauquet.
Right. Pauquet. Daniel Pauquet.
Yes.
Daniel Pauquet.
Daniel.
We're going to have a little look at Quebec from a very different angle this morning. And I'm not going to ask this guy to begin with, but what his particular politics are. I want him to explain to us the political situation in Quebec in relation to l'évêque, in relation to sovereignty association, and what he predicts for the future. And then we'll see if his political motivations come through. Your name, sir, is Daniel Pauquet.
Yes, Jack.
And welcome to Vancouver.
Oh, I'm very glad to have been here, and I want to thank you to give me this opportunity to talk about Quebec, because I think that very often there is a blackout about the real situation, and I'd like also to talk about how communists all over Canada see the situation, and I come right through the Sovereignty Association and actual situation now in Quebec.
Okay, now, what is l'évêque a good man from your point of view?
I think that before we talk of l'évêque, we should talk about the French-Canadian people in Quebec that has elected. Oh, yes, because that's an important thing.
No, I want to know if you think René Lévesque is a good man.
Before we go on René Lévesque's thing, we have to talk about the people, because that's the people who have elected him. And actually, when René Lévesque was elected 2 years ago, this Wednesday was 2 years ago, they've elected the Parti Québécois as an alternative to the party.
As a which?
As an alternative.
Just a little Slowly, please.
Okay, as an alternative to the Liberal Party anti-labor policies. And now we are in a acute debate in Quebec, really, on the national question. And that concerns not only the people of Quebec, but the whole of Canada.
Okay,
people.
now a question.
Yes.
Is Lévesque a good man?
I think that we have to judge not a man, but the policies of the Parti Québécois, because...
Is he a good leader for the Parti Québécois?
I'm not a Parti Québécois member, but I will tell you what the Parti Québécois represents now. It represents a party that was elected with a social democratic platform, one can say. And also, it has shown that more and more the French-Canadian people in Quebec want to have a voice to say on their national future. And here we come to the actual situation in Quebec. You know, all the trade union movement, the youth movement are deeply concerned what is going to happen in Quebec. I think that not less than 1 year, we will have a referendum that will give the opportunity of the people in Quebec to vote on what is going to be their future.
Okay, in 1 year, you think that
Yes.
Lévesque will hold his referendum?
Referendum, yes.
Which will give them, as you will tell me, the possibility of the opportunity to vote on the form of their future.
Yes.
Danielle,
Right.
you are a politician, right?
Yes.
A simple question for a simple answer.
Yes.
Do you want to see Quebec, I know you're not a member of the Parti Québécois,
Yes.
do you want to see Quebec separate from Canada?
All communists over Canada are against separation
Oh.
and want a new deal. They want a real confederation of two equal nations on a voluntary basis. And that's why the referendum is so important, because it
Daniel,
gives...
that is double talk.
No,
First
no,
of
no,
all,
no,
that
no,
is
no.
double
It's
talk.
not double talk, because
Double
we
talk.
talk on a major issue concerning all Canadians. That is the fact that never in
Two
the past
nations
history...
on an equal basis.
That is so. And
that is
has
not confederation. That
yes,
is
that is
separation.
not at all. You know, confederation is a word that means federate with. It comes from Latin con, which means with, and federation. And actually, we don't have a federation or a confederation of in Canada.
We have a dominion.
We have a situation that does not recognize the national rights of French-Canadian people. And what really the people in Quebec want...
You said you were against separation.
I've said that I was against separation for a new confederation of unity and equality of two equal nations in Canada.
You want 10 balkanized states.
No,
with a
I don't.
weak
I want
central
one
federal
strong
government.
centralized state of two equal nations.
Daniel.
And that is a major issue. And that's why I take the opportunity here to talk of this to the people here in British Columbia, because since I was here, arrived now Sunday, I had the opportunity to meet with trade union leaders, youth representatives, and they understand this question because they have the same problems than the youth,
You
trade
know that
unionists in Quebec.
you know you are a member
concerning
of the
social,
National
economical
Committee
issues.
of the Young Communist League in Quebec, right?
Yes.
You know, of course, that there is an effect, no Communist Party in BC.
Yes, I have met with Maurice Roche, and here I have
But
just
no,
the
but
brief that's submitted to the...
There is no party as such. There are few members. That communism...
Oh, no, the Communist Party has rich traditions here in BC and has led a lot of
Rich
struggle,
traditions.
and still is one of, I think, a strong force, determinant in the labor policies here in this province.
You cannot name me two unions led by communists in BC.
You know, the unions here are led by the workers. The union here, they have social democrat members, they have communists, they have non-party
Why
members
would a
and
bright
members,
young fellow like
and
you...
they are
No, no.
also political
No party
forces
tactics. Must
that is
answer
not
questions.
tactics, because, you know, Jack, when we talk, I think that we will have to go back on something important for me to come. It's the national question. I have
No.
not finished to talk on
No.
this.
I want to
because-
ask you something else. How old are you, Daniel? How old are you?
I think before I will talk about the May age.
How old are you?
Hey, listen, Jack. Why don't we talk about this national question?
But I
that
want
come
to know.
talk-
No, I'll tell you what I want from you. I
And-
want to know why
Well,
a
Jack-
bright, intelligent young fellow like you would not be a Parti Québécois man with some reasonable possibility of winning instead of
then
a
you want
way
me
out
to talk
communist.
on what is the Parti Québécois policies?
No!
And I'm up to talk
What
about this
makes you a
because,
communist and not
before-
a Parti
Jack,
Parti
you know,
Québécois
the
man?
Parti Québécois is a force that was created now some 10 years ago and represent traditionally what we call the French-Canadian petit bourgeoisie of Quebec. And that is something, you know, in Quebec, in French-Canadian society, like in English Canada, there are differences, there are different interests. And that's why I see that the communists all over Canada, like more and more Democrats, support a new confederation because as workers, they share same interests. And they are under the domination created by big corporations, multinational monopolies. I have seen here in BC some relatives we have in Quebec, like ATT, Rayonier, Elcan and Kenworth, and so on. And the workers in Quebec,
good wages
the
and
workers
conditions.
in Quebec and the workers in BC, like another place in Canada, they have to face them every day for the trade union rights, for a better wages condition. And if you tell me that, you know, it is not to stay a long time to discover the high level of unemployment here, like it is in Quebec, the problems facing, I have seen here native youth, and it's incredible. I was really shocked to see how they are treated, and how they are forced to come in Vancouver without a job. And I've seen also the problem facing lodging, lodging place, lots, the place to stay. And we face the same problem in home. And that's why we say that the unity of these people here and the French-Canadian nation can work out for more democratic rights for the whole of the people.
You just won't stop talking, will you? I can't
I'm not
ask me
going
a question.
to start to talk because
I'm
it is
beaten. I
too
surrender.
important to
I will
talk
join
on.
the Young Communist League if you'll stop talking.
He's a bit too old now.
Take a break.
Okay.
40 now.
Take 4 minutes now. You'll take 4 minutes this time.
Daniel, who's your favorite world leader?
What?
Who is your favorite world?
World.
Le Mans, tout le monde.
The world leader.
World leader.
Well, you know, it's a real worthy question. But I will stick on the issue I came to talk of, Jack, because, you know...
Next question.
Yes, we do
What
on.
kind of a communist are you? Are you a Stalinist, a Maoist?
Still, it's a worthy question, Jack, but you know, if I come from Montreal and I have a little minutes in your program, you will agree with me that I will talk on what I came to talk. That is the national question.
But we don't want to bore people to death.
Oh, the people here in BC are not bored to death to this question because they realize more and more, even though that there is a blackout in the press, in the newspaper, that it's one of the important issues concerning all Canadians.
You are on
today.
a commercial television network.
And I take this time. I'm very glad to take this time to talk on this issue.
In fact, I'll be attacked as a communist because you were on the program.
No, you will be considered as a man who gives the possibility to talk on important issue. And now I will talk about how the referendum is coming now in Quebec and how the people see it. You know that, like I've said, the Parti Québécois was elected 2 years ago on really the platform that it will be a good government by comparison to the former.
They've done some good things.
They have done
auto
some
insurance.
Good things, really. But now they are preparing a referendum that will deal with the national question. And like I was saying, that is a question that concerns all the Canadians because it is very much in Quebec, the people are influenced by the attitude that English Canadians have on this issue, if English Canadians will recognize them as an equal partner for a new confederation. And
do you think that English Canadians going about saying, I do not recognize French Canadians as equal partners?
I say that there are more and more English Canadians that recognize this, while there are others who do not recognize
Hey, what about this business of the discrimination? What about this touch of racism? What about this touch of racism in Quebec?
What?
Touch of racism.
You know, it's all, Jack, well, better than
language
me. That's
racism.
our press and our media that encourage the division of our two people in this country, alongside with the racism and chauvinism sometimes. And that we are, if we are your chauvinists, and you may be so, but I think that the people of BC are not all of this, and they are glad to hear me on this question and to have information in a situation in Quebec.
And I am also a tame lackey of the capitalist system.
I would like to talk on this issue and the referendum Now, the question is not yet clear in Quebec what is going to be asked to the people of Quebec.
I'll tell you what it's
And
going to be.
the people of Quebec are very much influenced now by position adopted by, for instance, the CLC at the last Quebec convention when they made a move to recognize the two founding nations of this country. And that has a lot of importance for the working people of Quebec. For instance, you know that yesterday there was a multinational moving its basis
What
out
was
of
the name
Cadbury.
of that? Cadbury.
Yes.
Well,
and the leader of the CNTU, the union
they can't
there,
make money there. They're going to move out.
They said that yes, they were moving, not because they don't make money, it's because they want to make more profits, and they can move from one city to another city, to a province, to another province,
To
to a country,
Ontario.
to another
Was it
country.
Ontario? Yeah.
And it is to make more profit. And that's why we have to stand united and fight back this.
And
you know this, Jack. And you know that we will go through with this too.
Next time, I'll
Yes.
ask the questions.
Yes, go
Daniel Pauquet.
Yes.
Pauquet.
Pauquet.
He's 21. He's single.
Yes,
He
almost.
answered the question.
Almost.
Single.
Yes.
And he's a National Committee of the Young Communist League in Quebec, and he talks on and on and on. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Jack.
Daniel.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Daniel. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Is it 4:20 and a break? Thank you.
That's right, 4:20 break.
I'm a Seeing that this is Friday, we'll finish on a lighter note. Many people can't get through on the telephones. Have been getting some mail recently, and I'd like to give you some of the charming mail I receive in the course of my programming. The first one is from a friend. It has been a few years since I have listened to your pompous, arrogant Celtic rantings. It embarrasses me to hear of your continual destructive criticism. Luckily, I don't have time to watch the program. The next one was about the program we did on the hookers. You didn't offer anything to discourage young girls from taking up work as prostitutes. If you thought you made any headway in curing it, I say you are wrong. Your show did more harm than good. That was a sane, sound letter. Remember the one I did about the optician business, the molestings? Read that? If any one of them touched me, he'd get a smash in the chops and I'd walk out. Have these women never heard of getting the hell out of it? Obviously, there's good, tough common sense in Nanush Bay. Political letter. If you're going to be palsy-walsy with every Tory who comes on, we may as well go back to radio. They all sing the same old tune. That's from Vancouver. And here's another friend. Do us a favor, Jack, and don't ask the public to phone. Spoils the show, because like the radio talk shows, the only ones who seem to call are those borderline morons. Complimentary. And then a friendly one. It's good, finally, to see your frostbitten pirate's chubby face on the tube. Don't ever change your style. I can watch you, but I don't have to love you. Here's one that I endorse. One small point. Can you get rid of those people walking about at your back when you're doing interviews? Any such distractions take away from my concentration. I'm frightened to speak to them myself, so I thought I'd use that woman's letter to get the message across to people on the floor. Fan letter for Linda. Thanks for letting us see Linda. I heard her name many times on OR, but never saw her face. Clearbrook. The telephone calls have been a gem, though. They're lovely. You see them? Bring up the phone call logs, would you? Eh? Why do you have Webster on the news? Who wants to listen to someone who's made all his money exploiting the poor? Next one. Why have you taken off yoga to put on Webster? An hour of Webster is more than enough. Would much rather watch repeats of yoga than Webster any day. I'd like to complain about the Webster show. It's ruining my morning. I don't get anything done anymore. It's definitely the best show you have going. You'll notice, of course, how I saved that one for the last, you know. That's my own piece of personal public relations. And if you want to write to me, I do have an address. Webster, Post Office Box, 4700, Vancouver, BC, V6B4A3. Well, it's been a good week, been a rough week, it's been a tough week. Next week, of course, will be easier. Next week always looks easier on this business until you get there. I don't like the form of typing in that at all.
We get our V4 font, we'll be able
Well, that wasn't a V4.
Yeah, it was the V4.
We don't need a minute 30. Can we go out a little earlier this morning?
Can we go out a little earlier somewhere or another?
Not really, no. How about, okay, minute 30. Ask Linda what's up next
That's
week.
not possible.
Oh, I'll talk about the best of Webster.
A little bit about next week. Birch Rest Home, we hope. An update on that.
We'll have to see you later. The guy in the middle left. Is that R3 thing usable?
And to think, Suzanne, I trusted you.
Linda, I'll leave you
And
for
to thank
we've
Sid Thompson for Monday. No. An ENG on Sunday night.
Six weeks?
I think so, yeah.
Just checking with Linda that we've been on the air now with the Webster Show. We're at the end of our 6th week. And I've got to tell you, sometimes it seems like 6 minutes and not 6 weeks. And we're doing our best to bring you some fairly solid stuff, but not too solid, you know, not too heavy. Well, of course, this week I've had to concentrate of necessity on the judges' affairs, because, especially with the newspaper strike on, it's essential that people know what's happening and know the convolutions of all these various political positions which are being taken. Next week looks quite good. We'll be taking a keen interest in the BC Federation of Labour Convention. We have a couple of good, bright people coming next week. We may well, I've already had several phone calls from Pierre Burton's producer in Toronto, saying that I had better use that interview I did with him some time ago, or she'll put a ban against using it. We're not allowed to say on the air that Pierre Burton is gathering dust on a shelf. That's what his books do. But we're not supposed to say that about his pre-taped interviews. I'm only joking, Pierre's my friend. Linda.
Yes. Monday
it's Friday
morning?
today for sure?
I hope so.
What? What about Monday?
Monday, your friend Sid Thompson. Haven't seen him for a while.
BC Fed.
That's right.
And of course, we've got to follow up the rest home license suspensions,
right.
of any.
That's
Many
right.
other things. We'll be there. Don't forget, Best of Webster Sunday night, Monday morning, 9 a.m. precisely.
Has BCTV ever considered putting your program as an evening program, as I'm sure that you're missing a great audience? I would think your program is one of the best that BCTV has, but the majority of the people are working when your program is on the air.
Well, I would think it is one of the best programs they have too, but we have gone a deliberate and special way with this program. We hope to create 90 minutes of prime time in the morning. After all, no matter how good Webster might be on the odd occasions, do you really think that Webster...
Which would you say is softer?
The right one.
Just pick up the bag.
Ivory Snow. Detergent.
What do you usually think of when you're thinking of ivory?
Diapers.
It's for all but the baby. It should be Ivory Snow Soft.
Well, I want my baby to have the best.
I'm glad I could fix your machine right.
Webster wants to play golf in the afternoon once he gets settled in. Don't forget, I'm not 21 years of age anymore. I'm getting on to 36.
Oh. Okay, sir.
Now, do you understand? Will you pass the word around Cache Creek?
Yes, I will.
We're going to develop a special little portable TV set for cowboys.
Okay.
Right? So they can watch it.
Okay.
While they're rounding up their doggies.